Alright, y'all. Welcome back to the Tao of Investing. And today we're going to be talking about uninsured deposits. Now, with the fall of banks and people making runs on these banks, it's not surprising that people want to know, is my money secure? And since, especially in America, people are not taught about how and why banks operate the way they do, my wife actually sent me this article, and it's a really great article about what it means to have uninsured deposits and what's insured and what's not. Okay? Now, for those of you growing your investment portfolio or who just want more financial literacy, this is very important. Because if you have an account that is not, that's uninsured, no one's coming to back you up. And FDIC protection only goes to a certain amount. So let's get into this. This is from Investors Daily of Business Daily. 10 banks are most exposed to uninsured deposits. High levels of uninsured deposits helped do in Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, but it turns out they're not alone. 10 banks owned by U.S. illicit financial companies, including Bank of New York Mellon, Northern Trust, and Citigroup, are among those with the highest percentage of domestic deposits that are uninsured. Insurance from a Federal Deposit Insurance Corps, or the FDIC, guarantees bank deposits per institution per person up to $250,000. But for some reason, bank clients leave more than $250,000 deposited at banks. So if your savings account is under $250,000 or your checking account is under $250,000, you're good. If it's over that, if you got $1 million in a bank and you haven't moved that money around into smaller accounts, you're screwed. The FDIC does not officially insure such excess deposits. Such exposure spooked Silicon Valley Bank customers as depositors demanded their money back en masse in a classic bank run. Yeah, when a bank goes under, they're only, held accountable for what the FDIC can insure. More than that, you're on your own. That's why they tell you, diversify your accounts. They have various different savings accounts. They have trust funds. They have all this other stuff. You can have more than one. In fact, a lot of banks, especially for businesses, suggest you do so. Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank had some of the highest proportions of estimated uninsured domestic deposits across the entire industry. Yes, because they were millionaires. Who were those fly-by-night millionaires who said, oh, I can just put my money in banks and it's okay? No, boo, that ain't how that works. You are responsible for the money lost at a bank. The government is not and does not have to bail your ass out. The only reason the Biden administration wants to bail out these banks is because they backed the Democratic Party in the last election. If these were Republican-run banks, they wouldn't care. I mean, that's the honesty of it. The events at the SVB brought to light the unexpected risks to banks with such high degree of uninsured deposits. It doesn't take much to trigger a stampede of depositors firing up their banking apps and trying to transfer the money out. Uninsured deposits surged at many banks in the wake of the pandemic. Large U.S. banks held $7.9 trillion in uninsured deposits at the end of 2022, nearly up 41% from 2019. The level in 2022 rose as people found better places to put their money other than bank accounts, which is good. Now, before this gets too long, I just want to read this, okay? High level of uninsured deposits is only half the risk that Silicon Valley Bank faced. The other factor is the bank's high level of securities being held all the way to maturity compared with total deposits. This reliance on long-term investments made it difficult for Silicon Valley Bank to sell and raise capital fast enough to meet the swelling withdrawals from depositors. For instance, the Bank of New York Mellon's loans and hold-to-maturity securities are only 31.2% of total deposits. And that percentage is only 41 and 54% respectively at State Street and Northern Trust banks. Compare that with the nose-bleeding levels of 94 and 93% at Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Now, y'all, there are two other banks with more than $50 billion in assets and at least half their domestic deposits estimated as uninsured in total loss plus held-to-maturity securities that exceeded deposits at the end of 2022. First Republic Bank and Western Alliance Bancorp, a subsidies of Western Alliance Bank. Now, y'all, this should be regulated, but the banks can do what they want to. Nobody cares. This is why the Federal Reserve used to be important. It used to tell banks, hey, you can't take on that much uninsured loans. But the Federal Reserve doesn't do shit except write blank checks and raise the interest rate. They're supposed to stop this stuff from happening. Instead, they just don't care. But here are the banks with the highest uninsured deposit balances. Bank of New York Mellon, SVB Financial Group, State Street, Signature Bank, Northern Trust, Citigroup, HSBC Holdings, First Republic Bank, East West Bancorp, and Comerica. They are waiting. Okay? 2 out of the 10 have already fallen. And DC is in a rush to artificially protect these other 8. Why? Because their donors bank there. You cannot shore up financial security with heavy inflation and the mass printing of money. You can't. It's impossible. So if I were y'all, here's a little consumer advice. Find out how much you have in your bank account. Find out if your bank is secured. If it has FDIC protection. If it does, you're good. If it doesn't, find a bank that does. Please find a bank that does. My name is Daniel. This has been the Tao of Investing, and y'all, as more and more of these companies, of these banks fall, I'm going to do my best to report it to y'all because you need to know this stuff. You need to start planning just in case. Because this is how the '08 bubble popped. Some people knew, nobody shared. Or didn't care enough to share the information. We're going to try to get it to you as quickly as possible.